You'd think being one of Hollywood's most bankable stars would guarantee universal admiration. But for Tom Cruise, the opposite often proved true. For every billion-dollar blockbuster he headlined, there were fellow celebrities whispering or outright shouting that they couldn't stand working with him. Some called him arrogant. Others painted him as controlling, erratic, or simply unbearable to share a set with. And while fans saw the grin and charisma, behind the scenes the story was often very different. Here are the 12 celebrities who absolutely hated Tom Cruise the most. Let's get into it. Brad Pitt. The tension between Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise remains one of Hollywood's most famous Cold Wars. Their clash began in 1994 on Interview with the Vampire, where both were cast as undead aristocrats in a lavish Gothic adaptation. On paper, it was a dream pairing, two of the biggest names of the decade sharing the screen. In reality, it became a battle of egos. According to Pitt, the set was miserable. He later confessed in a Premiere magazine interview that he felt trapped in a dark, windowless environment for months while working alongside a co-star whose competitive energy never let up. "You've got to understand," Pitt explained. "There was just this competition that was exhausting." He never named Cruise outright in that moment, but the implication was unmistakable. Reports from crew members described two very different men colliding. Pitt, with his laid-back charm and reluctance to play Hollywood's power games, versus Cruise, known for his tireless discipline and relentless perfectionism. Pitt reportedly bristled at Cruise's habit of trying to dominate scenes, a clash that turned creative collaboration into silent warfare. The fallout lingered long after filming wrapped. They never reunited on screen, despite years of fan speculation about another pairing. Hollywood insiders claim Pitt actively avoided projects that would put him in Cruise's orbit again. For Pitt, it wasn't about professional jealousy, it was about sanity. He later admitted that while he respected Cruise's drive, he simply couldn't endure that kind of working environment again. The feud between the two remains a perfect snapshot of what happens when two alpha stars compete for the same spotlight. Brooke Shields. Some feuds start on movie sets. This one ignited on national television. In 2005, Brooke Shields spoke candidly in her memoir about her battle with postpartum depression and how antidepressants helped her recover. Her vulnerability resonated with mothers everywhere. But Cruise, a devout Scientologist, launched a public attack that stunned the world. Appearing on the Today Show, Cruise dismissed Shields' experience as misguided. He declared antidepressants dangerous and psychiatry itself pseudoscience. The implication was clear. He saw Shields not as brave but as misinformed. For Shields, the remarks cut deeply. In a fiery New York Times op-ed, she shot back, "Tom should stick to fighting aliens." Her words dripped with sarcasm, and the media devoured the feud. The fallout was swift. Critics lambasted Cruise for insensitivity, accusing him of stigmatizing women who struggled with mental health. Shields became a spokesperson for maternal health, her career enjoying a surge of sympathetic support. Meanwhile, Cruise's reputation took a nosedive. The same year, he had his infamous couch-jumping incident on Oprah, further fueling the perception that he had lost touch with reality. Years later, Cruise attempted damage control. He reportedly sent Shields a baby gift and offered a private apology. Shields accepted publicly, but in interviews, she made clear the wound hadn't fully healed. For her, Cruise's arrogance wasn't just offensive, it was dangerous. Their feud highlighted how his unwavering devotion to Scientology alienated colleagues who dared to live outside its rules. Shields may have, quote, forgiven, but the bitterness lingers in the Hollywood record. Russell Crowe. In the early 2010s, Russell Crowe and Tom Cruise were constantly compared. Both were leading men, both fronted expensive studio tentpoles. But where Cruise embodied polished control, Crowe embodied raw volatility, and according to reports, that contrast bred contempt. Industry insiders whispered about Crowe's disdain for Cruise's carefully manufactured persona. Crowe, who prided himself on method authenticity, allegedly saw Cruise as a product rather than an artist. In one rumored exchange, Crowe dismissed Cruise's media stunts as all for show, claiming that real actors didn't need such theatrics. The barbs became public when Crowe praised actors like Daniel Day-Lewis, while conspicuously leaving Cruise off any list of peers he respected. The rivalry deepened as their careers collided. Both pursued historical epics, and their agents reportedly battled for the same prestige scripts. When Cruise signed on to The Last Samurai, sources claimed Crowe mocked the project behind closed doors, suggesting Cruise was miscast as a warrior steeped in Japanese culture. It wasn't just artistic criticism, it was personal. The feud never erupted in screaming matches, but the cold dislike was unmistakable. Paparazzi noted that the two rarely acknowledged each other at award ceremonies, despite being seated near one another. And while both shared screen time in Universal's ill-fated The Mummy reboot attempt, 2017, they carefully avoided appearing too friendly on press tours. For Crowe, Cruise symbolized Hollywood's glossy, corporate machine, something he loathed. For Cruise, Crowe was a rival who refused to play nice. The result? A chilly, decades-long standoff that still sparks headlines whenever their names appear side by side. Thandiwe Newton. When Thandiwe Newton looked back on Mission Impossible 2, she didn't sugarcoat her experience. In a 2020 interview with Vulture, she admitted that working alongside Tom Cruise left her feeling anxious, intimidated, and deeply frustrated. Instead of a collaborative partner, she said, Cruise's intensity came across as suffocating. One story she shared stunned fans. Newton recalled a night shoot where Cruise insisted on running the scene dozens of times, adjusting not just his own delivery, but hers. At one point, he became so frustrated that he grabbed her lines, performed them himself, and told her to imitate his delivery. Newton said she felt humiliated, describing the encounter as a real struggle. What should have been teamwork became, in her words, scary. The atmosphere on set reflected Cruise's perfectionist streak. Known for pushing stunts to the extreme, he applied the same relentlessness to dialogue, leaving Newton overwhelmed. She confessed that she left the project with a heavy sense of failure, not because of her performance, but because the working conditions drained her confidence. Years later, her candor made waves. Fans praised her courage for speaking up about an A-list star's behavior. The revelation also reframed Mission Impossible 2, once criticized for being bloated and uneven. Many wondered whether the behind-the-scenes tension contributed to its flaws. Cruise never publicly responded to Newton's remarks, but the silence spoke volumes. For Newton, the feud marked a turning point. After that, she gravitated toward roles where she felt respected and heard. It wasn't just a professional clash. It was a reminder of how Cruise's much-praised intensity could sometimes alienate the very people working beside him. Alec Baldwin, Tom Cruise, and Alec Baldwin might sound like a match made in Hollywood heaven, but their collaboration on Rock of Ages, 2012, was anything but. Baldwin, known for his bluntness, later described the film as a disaster and hinted that Cruise's involvement only made things worse. Baldwin recalled rehearsals where Cruise's sheer volume became a problem. As the film's over-the-top rock star Stacey Jacks, Cruise reportedly belted out songs with such relentless intensity that even fellow performers found it exhausting. Baldwin joked in interviews that he often felt like a background player in The Tom Cruise Show, a phrase that didn't sound entirely like a joke. In his memoir, Baldwin noted that while Cruise was deeply committed to the role, his performance bordered on parody. Critics agreed, with many singling out Cruise's eccentric portrayal as emblematic of why the film failed. Baldwin, who prided himself on ensemble work, seemed to resent Cruise's larger-than-life approach dominating the production. The fallout wasn't personal attacks, it was avoidance. Baldwin quickly distanced himself from Rock of Ages in later interviews, calling it one of the low points of his career. The implication was clear. Sharing the screen with Cruise had been exhausting rather than exhilarating. For Baldwin, who thrives on biting satire and layered performances, Cruise's bombast was simply too much. And for Cruise, the role was just another example of his willingness to gamble on risky projects. Together, they created a film that bombed and a behind-the-scenes dynamic that Baldwin clearly never wanted to revisit. Mark Wahlberg. Few Hollywood feuds were as fiery as Mark Wahlberg's reaction to one of Tom Cruise's most controversial comments. The spark came in 2013, when Cruise compared the grueling physical demands of acting in action films to fighting in Afghanistan. The remark, made during a lawsuit deposition, leaked to the press, and exploded. Wahlberg, who had close ties to veterans, was outraged. At a charity event for wounded soldiers, he blasted Cruise without hesitation. For someone to sit there and say, "My job is as tough as being in the military," Wahlberg fumed. "How f***ing dare you?" The crowd erupted in applause, cementing Wahlberg's stance as a champion for authenticity. Behind the scenes, industry insiders claimed Wahlberg had already been wary of Cruise, seeing him as someone who often hogged the spotlight. But this comment was a breaking point. Wahlberg reportedly told colleagues he'd knock him out if they ever crossed paths in that context. While Wahlberg later softened his words in interviews, the anger had already made headlines. The fallout damaged Cruise far more than Wahlberg. For months, memes and late-night jokes mocked Cruise's comparison, painting him as out of touch. Wahlberg, by contrast, was praised for standing up for veterans. Their feud wasn't born of on-set tension, but of values and respect, and it highlighted how quickly Cruise's public image could be undercut by his own statements. While the two eventually avoided further public jabs, the animosity lingers as one of the clearest examples of Cruise's ability to alienate colleagues without even sharing a screen. For Wahlberg, the line was simple. No movie set, no matter how demanding, could ever be compared to a war zone. Leah Remini. Leah Remini's feud with Tom Cruise isn't just personal, it's ideological, and it has dominated headlines for years. Once one of Scientology's most visible celebrity members, Remini walked away from the church in 2013 and immediately became its loudest critic. And at the center of her criticism? Tom Cruise. In her memoir Troublemaker and her Emmy-winning docuseries Leah Remini, Scientology and the Aftermath, she repeatedly singled out Cruise as the face of what she described as systemic abuse within the organization. Remini alleged that during her years in the church, members were pressured to treat Cruise like royalty. She recalled an infamous dinner party where she asked innocently about David Miscavige's wife's whereabouts, only to be reprimanded and later ostracized for questioning anything connected to Cruise or church leadership. Her most damning remarks came in interviews where she described Cruise as diabolical and accused him of being fully aware of alleged abuses within Scientology while maintaining a polished public image. According to Remini, his charisma wasn't a mask for ignorance, it was a cover for complicity. Scientology leaders and Cruise's representatives dismissed her claims as false and vindictive, but her message resonated with millions. The fallout was massive. Every time a new Mission Impossible film released, Remini's quotes resurfaced, keeping scrutiny of Cruise's faith alive. Unlike fleeting celebrity spats, this feud tied Cruise's reputation directly to one of Hollywood's most controversial institutions. And for Remini, the animosity isn't about a bad film set or a bruised ego. It's about exposing a system she believes Cruise has helped shield. In many ways, her fight with him became the defining chapter of her post-Scientology career. Jon Voight and Tom Cruise's paths first crossed on Mission Impossible in 1996. Voight played Jim Phelps, mentor turned villain, while Cruise made his producing debut alongside starring as Ethan Hunt. But according to industry insiders, what should have been a fruitful collaboration quickly soured. Voight reportedly bristled at how Cruise dominated creative control. Instead of the ensemble feel of the original television show, the film was reshaped around Cruise's star power. By some accounts, Voight felt his character was reduced to a mere stepping stone to showcase Cruise. For a veteran actor steeped in method traditions, that shift stung. Years later, interviews and biographies suggested Voight remained cold about the franchise. He never returned for sequels and rarely spoke of the film publicly. Insiders claimed he considered Cruise's style, intensely controlling, heavily involved in every production detail, as emblematic of a new Hollywood he didn't respect. For Voight, acting was about character work. For Cruise, it was about spectacle. The generational gap only widened the rift. Voight came from an era of grit and nuance, while Cruise embodied blockbuster efficiency. According to one report, Voight once quipped that the Mission Impossible series was just stunts with dialogue in between, a bar many assumed was aimed squarely at Cruise. The fallout is subtle but clear. While other veteran actors were brought back in later sequels as nods to continuity, Voight's absence remains glaring. Fans often speculate if the off-screen chill was as decisive as the on-screen plot twist. Either way, Voight's quiet disdain adds another layer to Cruise's reputation as a star who reshapes entire productions around himself, sometimes at the expense of co-stars. Nicole Kidman. Nicole Kidman's relationship with Tom Cruise is perhaps the most high-profile of all his feuds because it unfolded not just in Hollywood, but in headlines worldwide. Married in 1990, they were the industry's golden couple, appearing side by side in films like Days of Thunder and Eyes Wide Shut. But behind the glamour, resentment grew. Kidman has spoken cautiously, often avoiding specifics, but friends and biographers have filled in the gaps. According to journalist Andrew Morton's unauthorized biography of Cruise, Kidman resisted his devotion to Scientology, creating tension in their marriage. Reports claim that she clashed with church officials and bristled at Cruise's insistence that their adopted children be raised in the faith. When Cruise abruptly filed for divorce in 2001, Kidman was blindsided. In later interviews, she hinted at feeling controlled, saying she had married young and lost her sense of identity. In one striking comment, she described herself as having escaped after the split. Those close to her suggested the word choice wasn't accidental. It reflected deep bitterness. The fallout shaped both of their careers. Kidman, free of Cruise's shadow, took on daring projects, from The Hours to Dogville, eventually winning an Oscar. Critics praised her post-divorce career as fearless, contrasting it with Cruise's blockbuster-driven trajectory. Their personal feud became symbolic. Kidman represented independence and reinvention, while Cruise became associated with rigidity and control. Although they maintain a veneer of civility, sharing brief public appearances for the sake of their children, the emotional distance is palpable. For Kidman, the marriage was a defining chapter, but one she rarely revisits without a tone of relief. The bitterness may not always be spoken, but in Hollywood, silence can say more than words. Mickey Rourke. Mickey Rourke is not known for tact, and when it came to Tom Cruise, he unleashed one of the bluntest takedowns ever delivered by a fellow actor. In a 2022 interview on Piers Morgan Uncensored, Rourke was asked about Cruise's massive success with Top Gun Maverick. His response went viral. "That doesn't mean Suze to me," he snapped. He dismissed Cruise as irrelevant and accused him of playing the same part for 35 years. Rourke's comments cut deep because they reflected a common criticism, that Cruise, for all his box office dominance, rarely strays beyond heroic archetypes. Rourke contrasted him with actors like Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, whom he called real actors because of their willingness to take risks. For Rourke, Cruise represented everything shallow and formulaic about modern Hollywood. The fallout was swift. Fans of Cruise flooded social media to defend him, pointing to his meticulous stunt work and global box office power. But Rourke refused to back down, doubling down in follow-up interviews. He argued that Cruise's career choices might make him rich and famous, but they lacked artistic credibility. The feud exposed a generational divide. Cruise, disciplined and brand-conscious, built a career on consistency. Rourke, erratic and self-destructive, built his on volatility. For Rourke, hating Cruise wasn't about personal slights, it was about ideology. In his eyes, Cruise was a corporate machine, while he was a tortured artist. The irony? By 2022, Cruise was still headlining billion-dollar films, while Rourke's career had faded into cult curiosities. Still, his barbed attack ensured his disdain for Cruise became part of Hollywood's permanent feud history. Matt Lauer. Some feuds are whispered about. This one unfolded in front of millions. In 2005, Tom Cruise sat down with Matt Lauer on The Today Show to discuss his controversial comments on psychiatry. What followed became one of the most infamous interviews in television history. Lauer pressed Cruise on his remarks about antidepressants, citing Brooke Shields as an example. Cruise fired back, calling Lauer glib and accusing him of ignorance. His voice rose, his body language tightened, and what was meant to be a promotional appearance turned into a combative lecture on Scientology's stance against psychiatry. Viewers were stunned. The segment aired repeatedly across networks, cementing the image of Cruise as unhinged and confrontational. Lauer later described the experience as like walking into a buzzsaw. He admitted he was shocked by how defensive Cruise became, saying he lost it live on air. The fallout was brutal for Cruise. Combined with his Oprah couch-jumping incident the same year, the interview contributed to a steep decline in his public image. Studios grew wary, and Paramount briefly severed ties with him. For Lauer, the moment boosted his profile, at least temporarily, as the anchor who stood his ground against one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Years later, Lauer's own career imploded after misconduct allegations, but his clash with Cruise remains etched in media history. It wasn't just a feud, it was a turning point in Cruise's career. In that moment, millions of viewers saw not the charming superstar, but the combative zealot. And it was Lauer who gave them the stage to witness it. Charlize Theron. Charlize Theron's feud with Tom Cruise is less about explosions and more about avoidance. Despite both being A-list actors for decades, they've never shared a screen, and according to industry chatter, that's no accident. Reports claim Theron turned down projects that would have paired her with Cruise, citing concerns about his reputation and intensity. While she has never launched direct public attacks, her distancing speaks volumes. In Hollywood, silence often functions as rejection. Biographers even noted that Theron once joked in private about needing earplugs if cast opposite him, a jab at his relentless energy and dominating presence on set. Whether playful or pointed, the remark highlighted her wariness. Insiders say Theron prefers working with directors and co-stars who foster collaboration, not control. Cruise's reputation for micromanaging productions, often serving as both star and unofficial co-director, clashed with her desire for balance. By steering clear, Theron preserved her independence and avoided the risk of being overshadowed. The fallout is subtle but telling. Fans often wonder why two of Hollywood's brightest stars never teamed up for a tentpole blockbuster. The answer may lie in Theron's quiet but firm decision. Better to avoid Cruise altogether than risk the kind of feuds other co-stars have described publicly. In the end, her absence from his orbit is its own form of animosity. When you look across these stories, on-set blow-ups, personal betrayals, ideological wars, the pattern is clear. Tom Cruise inspires fierce loyalty from some, but equally fierce hatred from others. His intensity, his beliefs, and his control over his projects have left a trail of co-stars and colleagues who'd rather never work with him again. So what do you think? Which feud was the most explosive, and who else belongs on this list? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like and share if you enjoyed the dive. And don't forget to subscribe for more untold Hollywood rivalries. Until next time, we'll see you in the next one.